Oh, hello. How you doing? Today we're going to begin working on collecting evidence from our crime scenes. Please make sure that you're being consistent with the type of evidence that you're utilizing in this next bit, and please make sure that you're taking notes and paying attention to the types of materials that we're using when we're collecting different types of evidence. Let's begin. Is that weed? I'm calling 911. Highly suspicious. This is what we would call dried plant matter. Things like this can be collected in a plastic bag. Now, because this is the scene of a crime, you are not going to want to touch things with your bare fingers. So I would recommend using some forceps after you put rubber gloves on. Seeing as how I don't have them, except for the ones that we use when we're cleaning the toilets, I'm not putting those on. But I will collect the weed, put it in the bag, try not to crumple it too horribly, and I'm going to seal it for now. We're going to come back to that in a minute. A rock that is cracked. A cracked rock. We'll have to collect this as well. Again, not using my fingers. I'm going to put this into my canister, picking it up with the forceps. And I'll make sure that I put a lid on it. And we'll come back to this in a bit. After doing a thorough sweep of the environment, I found what I think is blood. But I'm not sure. The first thing you should do is test it, just like they do in all of those old school movies. Oh, that's actually blood. Oh my god. Just kidding. Alright, for real this time. So, if it's wet, then you can just sample it. Let's pretend that this is dry. If it's actually dry, what you'd want to do is you'd want to moisten your swab with distilled water that you would take with you to the scene. Okay, so that is distilled water, so that way it doesn't have any other ions or any other items or dissolved materials in the water. Then you would just collect your sample. Okay, now you don't just get to put this in an envelope. That's not a great idea. So what you end up doing with your blood or unknown liquid sample, whether it's dry or not, is you're going to put it in what we call a pharmacist's fold or a chemist's fold. A pharmacist's fold is going to include a piece of paper that is sterile that you would have brought with you to the scene. You're going to fold it into thirds. So you fold it about a third of the way over and then back over on itself. So it creates this nice little pocket. Then you also do it in thirds again from left to right. That way you're locking in whatever you have inside of the pharmacist's fold. In this case, we are going to be putting our blood sample in here. So we take our sample, and you're going to want to make sure that your thirds, your little box is going to contain your object of interest. So we fold it up, fold it down, fold it over, and again. Now you're going to want to put these materials into paper, because if it is an organic material, if you put it into plastic, you're essentially going to be suffocating it, and you'll cause it to rot and die. If you've ever put mushrooms in a sealed container, or if you had a sandwich in a container, a plastic container, you left it in there for a long time, you know that it starts to decompose. So we're going to put it not in a plastic bag. We're going to put it in a paper envelope. So we're going to put it in here. Now, you do not lick any kind of a seal. If the container that you're utilizing has a seal like this, where you can actually lick it old school style, don't do that. You're going to moisten it, again, with distilled water. That way you don't leave any of your DNA on the sample. So, whoop. I'm going to pick that up. I don't litter. You're going to fold it down, and we're going to seal it. Okay? Now we're going to come back to this in a little bit. All right, so now that you have your items, what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to start taping them or sealing them shut. So I'm just using a regular roll of masking tape that I found down here in the basement. So what I've done is, oh, also another little hint, fold over the ends so that way you can actually get a hold of it again instead of having to tear it off the piece again. It's just going to save you a bunch of time. Every time you rip it, just fold it back over on itself so that way it's easier to get a hold of. So what we're going to do is we're going to start packaging our items, and I'm going to try to go in either order or by type. So the first thing we did was we collected this dry vegetative matter, right? So remember, again, I know it doesn't look like it, but I'm wearing gloves. You want to make sure you're wearing gloves. You don't want to leave behind prints and stuff like that. So what we're going to do is we're going to get ourselves a piece of sealing tape or evidence tape. Now this is a stand-in. I've already ripped one off here. This is a stand-in for what we would actually utilize in real life. So in order to be valid, you have to make sure that you have your date, the time, the item, and then your initials or your signature. If you want to fit the location on there, that's fine. But most of this is going to be packaged in a larger container that will have that information on it. So we're going to start by putting the time. So as of right now, I believe it is 10:16 a.m. So I'm going to put, the date as well, which is 10/12. So 10/12. Don't just put 20, put 20/20. 20 leaves too much room. And the time is 10:16 a.m. So 10:16 a.m. I'm just using purple ink. Typically you'd want to use black or blue. The item is going to be dry vegetative matter. Something else I should probably point out, I'm doing this on a clear clipboard. That way I can pull it back off pretty quickly. So it's a very smooth surface. I know it doesn't look like it because you're looking through it and you're looking at my really rough crafting table. But this is definitely, that's stuck on there. This is definitely a clear plastic clipboard, which helps to peel the tape back off. Dried vegetative matter in plastic bag. Wow, that is really wobbly. Sorry about that, guys. So now the next thing that we have to do, and arguably the most important, didn't put my initials. Now the next thing we have to do is we have to make sure that we seal this. Now the whole point in sealing this is that people can't get into it and tamper with it. So what you're going to do is you're actually going to fold the part that you sealed, you get a little Ziploc baggie, you're going to fold it over, and then we're going to apply tape over it so that nobody can access that little fold and open the bag back up. So pull my tape up. Again, you don't need to have tape that's this thick. If you have like the thinner stuff, which is I believe is like exactly half of this, that would be just fine. So I'm going to lightly set that down so I can pull it back up again. So I'm folding the bag over, okay? And now I'm putting my tape over that fold. I'm sealing it. Now I kept air in the bag, so like your Doritos, they don't get squished, because remember this is evidence. And you're going to fold it all the way over, and I'm making sure that I'm pushing this down. Fold it all the way over, and I'm making sure that I'm pushing this all the way down on that edge. And now I'm going to do the same thing on this side. So I'm going to just shake it out of you here, so that way the leaf goes all the way down to the bottom. And I'm folding this over, and I'm really making sure that I'm sealing this all the way down. Now, you might be thinking to yourself, okay, Mr. Hamlin, but honestly, somebody could pull that tape off. And you know what? You'd be right with this tape. Somebody would be able to pull this tape off, and they'd probably be able to reseal it, and it wouldn't be a big deal for this type of tape. But real evidence tape tears so easy. So it would show that somebody had tampered with the evidence. This one, not so much. So when I'm looking at these, when you send me photos here in the near future, or Miss Lizzie in the near future, I'm going to be looking, and she's going to be looking, for you to have folded over the edge and then to tape over the edge. Now, is there any way for me to get underneath this without messing with the tape and access that Ziploc? There absolutely is not any way for me to get in there and mess with this without it being visible. So that's how you properly seal a plastic bag. Now, one of the other type of containers that we had was the canister, okay? Now, remember, I advised you to start collecting like old prescription bottles. This is an old cinnamon jar that we used up because I made French toast the other day. And so it obviously has parts that open up. On a real canister, it's not going to have an opening. If you wanted to use something like an old jar, that would be totally fine. Or an old paint container also would be good as long as you rinsed it out. This would not clean up, so I'm not using it. So we are using the spice jar. So the first thing you need to do is you need to get your tape ready. Now, the last thing, or one of the last things that we did was we utilized the pharmacist fold in here. Now, this is a nondescript envelope, isn't it? Do you remember what we put in here? I'll give you a sec. Do you remember what we put in this bad boy? So, it's definitely the pharmacist fold. So, what did we put in our pharmacist fold in this case? Hopefully you remember. So, is there a problem with putting it in the envelope and not putting the label on it right away? Ding, 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 ding. Yeah, you may forget what you've put in here, especially if you're collecting a lot of evidence. So it's not super professional to do it the way that we did it. As a matter of fact, I would recommend that you do everything right in the moment, seal it appropriately, label it appropriately right on the spot instead of collecting everything and then going back and redoing it, because you are going to forget. In this case, we know that it was a blood sample on the driveway. But in the future, please make sure you're labeling it right away. We're just doing it this way for the intents and purposes of introducing this type of evidence collecting. So this is going to be very similar to what we did with the Ziploc. So the first thing we need to do is we need to get our tape ready. All right, so I've got my tape ready. Now I want you to take a look at what I put on the tape. I put the date, I put the time, and then in my example of what it is, I put dried red liquid, and then I put that it was in the driveway to help for me to identify the location that we pulled this in case we pull blood from more than one location. Or in this case, a dried red liquid. Now, I didn't put blood because I didn't do a test to find out if it was blood. So because I do not know that it was blood, you can't put that it was blood. So I put dried red liquid. So please make sure you're doing that. So unless you did a confirmatory test, which I haven't taught you about that yet, so you can't use it, please make sure that you're just describing what you sampled, okay, not what you think that it is. So now I'm going to pull my tape off of there. Good thing I'm putting that on that really nice, easy tear-away plastic. Now, we have our envelope. Now, same deal. You're going to fold it down, okay, increase it. I'm not smooshing what's inside the envelope. I'm just pushing it down, increasing it. Now, same deal, I'm going to put my tape over the top. I'm going to make sure that I'm applying it. Ooh, it's getting really sticky here, guys. I'm going to make sure that I'm applying it all the way down. I'm going to flip it over, and I'm going to pull the tape tight, making sure there's not any gaps. Same thing on the other side. No gaps. Now, this time it overlapped. I put a lot of tape. Not a huge deal. If you do that, if you don't do that, it's fine. Just make sure it wraps over the edge, okay, on both sides, and make sure that you are covering that area where you folded it over. Now, why again? Because then they can't access it and open it without damaging the tape. So this one is properly sealed, and we are good to go. Now, I didn't show you how I packaged everything, but everything that we did package, I think, gives you an idea of how you should be doing every type of evidence you may be collecting. I would like to see a photo of all of the fronts of your evidences and the back. And since this one doesn't really have a front or back, the top and then the sides, okay, to show me that you've properly sealed it. Another thing that you can utilize the pharmacist fold for is tiny little powders and things like that you want to keep track of. If you don't have a small container, then you can kind of contain the little powder inside of the pharmacist fold. So if you've got some powder that you want to pull from the seam, save this for later, for model making. So again, it gets kind of contained in your little fold, so you can fold it over and then back on itself, which is going to keep it in the middle. Fold it and again. So now we don't need to tape this off, but because this is a dried compound or a dried material, this could be paint chips, this could be anything. I can put this in plastic because it's not organic. If it were organic, then I'd want to make sure that I was not putting it in plastic. I'd want to put it instead in paper. So I'm going to seal this up. Just like the other stuff we've gone over so far, we're going to come back to this in a bit.